Okay, you're on.
Hey, late night from Willowdale. We haven't done one in a couple of weeks. The last one we did was from Woody's, which is we need to go live from places other than my apartment. Um, so yeah, let's talk about the big topic. Well, there are lots of topics to talk about, but so today I had a letter in the New York Times. It's on my Facebook page. People can access it. And it was about Saudi Arabia and Iran, or Saudi Arabia. I like to call it Saudi Arabia because Israel and Saudi Arabia are so close. Um, so it was basically uh, with the last 2 or 3 weeks, and in our last video we did mention this because it was already an issue about the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi security forces at the consulate in Istanbul. And I was just basically saying in my New York Times letter that Saudi Arabia will get a slap on the wrist, and they have. The Trumpians and the people in the U.S. Congress aren't going to do that much. Nothing's going to happen to Saudi Arabia. And but on November 4th, Trump will slap new sanctions on Iran, even though Iran hasn't done anything wrong. Iran complied with the International Arms Control Agreement, known as the Iranian Arms Control Accord, or
The Joe Cap or whatever they call it.
GCAP,
I have no idea. Right.
Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Iran has complied with an international arms agreement that was, agreed with the Russians, the Chinese, the major European powers, and they get sanctioned. They're sanctioned now and facing further sanctions in 2 weeks, and yet they did nothing wrong. The Saudis murder a journalist working for an American newspaper, the Washington Post, Jamal Khashoggi, in a foreign country, Turkey, Istanbul, and they got in a black eye on the international stage. Everyone's condemned the Saudis, but Saudi Arabia will get a slap on the wrist, and that's it. Yet Iran will face all these sanctions in a couple of weeks, and they did nothing wrong. The only thing they did was comply with the International Arms Control Agreement, and they will get sanctioned. So the point of my letter to the New York Times today was this hatred of Iran by the Trump administration, its supporters, people in Congress, and segments of the American society. It's just irrational. It's just no basis in fact for it. There's no basis in fact to hate Iran as much as they do. And yes, Saudi Arabia has been condemned in the United States and around the world, but they will get a slap on the wrist for what they've done, and for the horrors they've condemned in what they've done in Yemen. And the Saudis are murdering people in Yemen. They're slaughtering people in Yemen, and it goes without sanction. Yes, because not that the world community is not paying attention. It's not that the international media is not paying attention. It's just that the most powerful country in the world, the United States, gives them a license to do it. So, they got a black eye. Mohammed bin Salman has given. It was reckless. He stretched a little too far. Killed this journalist in Istanbul, and they're paying for it in a public relations way. But ultimately, the Saudis will just get a slap on the wrist, and business will go on. The French will continue sending weapons to Iran or to Saudi Arabia. That's the thing, right? The French will no longer deal with Iran, but they'll continue selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. The British will continue selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. Because Saudi Arabia is a big client. They have lots of money and they'll pay for this stuff. And Saudi Arabia will get Saudi Israelia, because they're teamed up with Israel, will continue to get away with murder. And yet the weird thing is they're not that powerful. They're not that powerful. They went after Qatar. They went after Canada. And Canada's a far more powerful country than Saudi Israelia. We don't need their oil. We don't need anything from Saudi Israelia. But they seem to have this intimidation factor. And a lot of countries are intimidated. And it's weird. And of course, yes, they love to buy weapons so they can kill their own people, and they can kill people in Yemen and fund the Taliban and fund all these nutty Islamist groups. So the French sell them weapons, the British sell them weapons, Canadians sell them weapons. Don't get me wrong. We have this weapons selling these light armored vehicles in Saudi Arabia. Okay, I basically agree. Let that contract go through, but let's never ever deal with Saudi Israelia again. Let's never do that. Let it go through, but let's basically have very minimal contacts with Saudi Israelia, which we already do, because they basically downgraded their relationship with Canada, and Canada's downgraded their relationship with them. The Saudis need to be isolated on the international stage, and they will be somewhat, but it's all about money, and Trump is very honest. It's all about money, and he says, why would I give up my relations with Saudi Arabia, which, go back to the 1930s, when there's so much money to be made from Saudi Arabia? It's a long, horrible story. But there's a lot of money to be made from dealing with Iran, too. The Iranians have a lot of money, and Iran is a country you can trade with. But, there seems to be this irrational hatred of Iran in the United States. It goes back to the Islamic Revolution of 78, 79, the Iran hostage crisis. And it continues. And it blinkers any sort of rational dealings with Iran. The Trump administration, the Obama administration tried to break this. They did, and they knew there was a lot of hostility in Congress. And so they signed the Iranian nuclear deal knowing that it was like an executive fiat. The hatred in Congress towards Iran is incredible. Not based on any rational... It's a religion. It's not based on rationality. But President Obama saw that he needed to break this. And they signed the Iranian nuclear deal. And it was a great deal. And everyone thinks it's a great deal. And the Iranians are abiding by it. The only people who violated it was the United States. So... In a couple of weeks, Trump's going to impose more sanctions on Iran, and Iran has done nothing wrong. Yet Saudi Arabia murdered a journalist who worked for an American newspaper, the Washington Post, and they will not get sanctioned. They're conducting a war in Yemen that is genocide, basically, and they don't get sanctioned. Saudi Arabia, because I see Saudi Arabia and Israel as one country. They will never get sanctioned because they're the official enemies, and they're not, and they're not. Iran is an official enemy. You also have to hate them, but Iran could do so much to help the United States. After 9/11, the Iranians said, we're going to help you hunt down we're going to help you stop terrorism. And let's remember, most of the 9/11 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. Egypt had a few, and most of the 9/11 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia knew this was happening, and they could care less. Saudi Arabia supports the Taliban. They support Al Qaeda. They support They support ISIS. They support all the wackiest, nuttiest people in the world, and they never get sanctioned. None of the 9/11 hijackers came from Iran. Iran told the United States after 9/11, we want to work with you to stop this kind of craziness. Iran could be so useful in solving the problems of the region, Central Asia to the Middle East, because Iran borders both, like Turkey. From Afghanistan to Syria, Iran could be really useful. It just takes a forward-thinking person to engage the Iranians. Anyone who's seen Hossein Irani, the president of Iran, on TV, will know this is a solid, smart guy. The Iranians are a very sophisticated society. They're a democracy. They have elections that everyone said, most international observers say are fair. Iran is a democracy. Compared to Saudi Arabia, Iran is a Jeffersonian democracy. It's time for the Trump people and the U.S. administration to recognize this and deal with Iran. They could be so helpful in solving all these interregional conflicts. They really could be. They just need to be engaged, and they don't need to be insulted, and they don't need to be sanctioned. So I'm rambling here a bit, but
no,
I'm
so
not
far,
a shill,
so good.
and I'm not a shill for Iran. They got lots of human rights problems. They're not a beacon of human rights. They imprison people for no reason. They imprison foreigners, Canadians, Americans. Yeah, they imprison a lot of people for no reason. They're hardly a beacon of human rights. And they're very meddlesome in the region, but nothing compared to Saudi Israelia. So I think it's time for the world to stand up for Iran. And Iran could be so... If Trump really... like what he's done... Don't get me wrong, I like what he's done with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. I think that dialogue is good. You need to do that with Rouhani. And if he could do that with Rouhani, he realized, you know what? Maybe Iran's not the enemy that we've portrayed them to be. And the world would be a better place if he dealt with Iran. He could deal with Syria, he could deal with Afghanistan. The 17-year-old war in Afghanistan, a war without end. The Iranians could be very helpful in solving this. You need to engage. In Afghanistan, they need to bring the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Iranians, the Russians, even the Saudis, because they're funding all these crazy people, together and say, look, this is the way to do it. The Saudis fund the Taliban. They fund the people. They fund the people that are killing Americans in Afghanistan.
And it goes deeper than that too, right? All these madrasas and all this crazy shit.
Exactly. So the Saudis. I said in my letter in the New York Times, and I hope some people read it, is that Iran can be far more constructive than Saudi Arabia in solving some of these regional problems in the Middle East into Central Asia. So, so I'm rambling here, but the problems in the world aren't intractable. You need to talk to people. Trump shouldn't be having this war with China on trade. Yeah, China is kind of a nasty player on the world stage. And China is in some ways like Saudi Arabia too. They imprison journalists. The guy from China, China is not a great human rights. The guy from Interpol, who's from China, went to China and didn't come out. No, China is a kind of a nasty ass place. But you kind of need to engage rather than isolate. And getting China in a trade war is not a good thing, especially when China holds a lot of U.S. debt. and they have leverage over the United States. Most countries don't, but they do. Even Canada had some leverage over the U.S. Uh, that's why I think Trump realized he had to make a deal, because Americans need Canadian lumber, they need Canadian newsprint, they need our aluminum, and they need our steel. And yeah, Canada has some leverage over the U.S. The NAFTA thing was a Faustian bargain, but Trudeau didn't need to make a deal. So, unfortunately, the United States is still the most powerful economy in the world. And the weaponization of the American dollar and the American economy is far more dangerous than any sort of nuclear weapon. The United States is a country of 350 million people who generally are relatively wealthy. No, there's a lot of poverty in the U.S., but it's a powerful economy. Everybody wants to trade with it, and the U.S. knows it. And the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency of the planet Earth, going back to the Second World War. And the U.S. can weaponize their power. So, they say to the Europeans, you can't trade with Iran because we're going to say, that means because we will not allow you to trade with the U.S. They say to Canada and Mexico, don't strike deals with China because we won't allow it under NAFTA or the new agreement,
USMCA,
YMCA, whatever. The United States can weaponize their economy to strike back at others, because they can say, you can't trade with us if you trade with them. And that's forget about nuclear weapons and Trump withdrawing from the INF Accord and the agreement that Reagan and Gorbachev struck. It's the weaponization of the U.S. economy that's the most dangerous thing.
How are they weaponizing it, though? Forgive my ignorance,
they have the power to say you don't have access to our markets. And yeah, so the French and the Brits and the Dutch say, okay, well, we can't make that much money out of Iran. We need to have access to the U.S. market. Same with Cuba. The U.S. basically said, companies trading with Cuba, you want to have access to the Cuban market. The Helms, forget what it was. Red Path Sugar we used to have these huge Cuban sugar boats come into the harbor of Toronto, and then all of a sudden, so they stopped because Red Path Sugar, which everyone knows, and is right on the port of Toronto, famous place, one of the few industrial places right in the port of Toronto, used to import a lot of Cuban sugar. But once this late 80s law came in, I forget, all of a sudden they said, no, couldn't import Cuban sugar anymore. Because America said, no, if you import Cuban sugar, you can't trade with the United States. The United States has power because of the strength of their economy, and they're weaponized. This is a weapon that they're using more and more, and Trump is going to use it. So, there goes the phone.
Let's keep it going. We'll keep it going. We'll keep it going. Technical difficulties. Sorry. Yeah. Khalid's a bit drunk.
Okay. All right. So we could go on and on about this, but yes, Canada, the Europeans should be able to trade with Iran. We should be able to trade with any country we want without sanction of the United States. But the U.S. has such power that they can do this stuff, and that's going to be the real. That's going to be the real global battle in the next few years, combating U.S. economic power and saying, no, we want to trade with Iran. We want to trade with this country. The hypocrisy is Trump says at the UN, every country should have its own sovereignty. But no, you won't allow countries to have sovereignty because they will dictate who you can trade with. I mean, I can go on and on about this, but
But isn't that part of the isn't that a really important part of the international rules based system or order or whatever they call it, like having the U.S. kind of like lead on a lot of these things? Like,
well, no, the U.S.
Is it like a catch-22 or is it not? Like,
no. The international-based system, the rules-based system set up after the Second World War, which the United States is part of,
right,
is gone. Trump doesn't believe in it, so he doesn't care. And don't get me wrong, the U.S. has always violated it when they felt they had to. Come on. There were softwood. Canada's had problems with the U.S. on softwood lumber and all sorts of issues for years. And we had to go to international tribunals. The Americans are a powerful country. They feel that they can violate the rules that they actually set up. And because they're the most powerful country on the planet.
Yeah, but if you set up rules, come on.
Yeah.
If you came up with the rules,
Yeah, exactly. But when you're the most powerful country in the world economically, and you control the world's currency, you can do whatever the hell you want. Okay, this thing's gone on rambling long. We'll go in future videos. We'll talk more about the weaponization of the American economy and
whatever
how
that means.
the U.S. will use the strength of their economy to threaten other countries. I made the point about Iran. Iran is going to face sanctions in a couple of weeks, and it's not right because they've done nothing wrong. Saudi Arabia will get a slap on the wrist for killing a journalist who worked for an American newspaper, the Washington Post. And their war in Yemen, and nobody cares. And it's not fair because Iran has complied with all the international stuff, and they just continue to get sanctioned, treated like dirt. It's irrational, it's weird, and it's time for the United States to get over it. Because Iran can be very useful for American diplomacy and American foreign policy. Okay. So I got all these signs here. Look at these signs. Josh Matlow, who won in my riding, my ward.
Right.
This guy, Aftab Kuram, or Kuram Aftab, I don't know how you... that's in Toronto Center.
Sounds Persian? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, who is that?
This is about democracy. And I want to point these two signs about... democracy is alive and well in Canada, and there's so many people running in the municipal elections. And, only this guy is not in... This guy in Toronto Centre, the incumbent, won. In this situation, Josh Matlow, the incumbent, lost. Joe Mahavitz.
Aren't they, like, really similar, though?
But democracy was alive and well. And when we're thinking about Saudi Israelia, and I'm thinking, Canada still has a thriving democracy, and you got to celebrate something. The world's such a nasty place.
No, I'm telling you.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to end the video. Yeah. Josh Matlow, who I supported, defeated an incumbent, Joe Mahavitz. And this guy, who no one knew, didn't go anywhere. But he fought. He actually put up signs. He fought an election. And he obviously didn't win. And it's about democracy. And I think Canada still has a thriving democracy. And despite what Doug Ford did, which I sort of agreed with, but Canada still has a thriving democracy. So despite all the stuff I just said tonight about how horrible the world is, I'm glad I live in this country, and kind of happy we legalized marijuana, and I'm happy that the municipal election had all these people running, and it's a good thing. And that's the way we'll end it. End that photo, but this fellow who ran and didn't stand a chance, but he ran.
He ran anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.